Okay, now we move on the half angle, and I really, some people really find half angle to be more of a struggle than any of the other ones. And sometimes it's just the mentality that you have going into it, just understanding what they're asking for. So when you have a half angle identity, what you're looking at is that inside the sign, you have an angle divided by 2. And so if we're looking at the one I have 105. 105 is the angle divided by 2. So this is sine of some angle being divided by 2. And when I take that angle and divide it by 2, I get 105. Now, if you look at the formula for half angle, I have plus or minus the square root of 1 minus the cosine of u over 2. So when they say the cosine of u, they're talking about this angle right here is going to be whatever we figured out right here. So we got to figure out that number. We got to figure out what number divided by 2 gives me 105, which hopefully you've already thought about it and said, you know what, I can just take 105 and multiply it by 2. And so that number right there for me is 210 degrees. So sine of 105 is the same thing as sine of 210 divided by 2. And since I figured out this top number, this u is 210, then in my formula I can get rid of the u and I can put the number 210. And the reason I like that is because 210 is on the unit circle, right? 210 is right here. It's got a reference angle of 30 degrees. And my formula says to use cosine of that. And cosine is the x value, and x value is long, so it's root 3 over 2. So I get root 3 over 2 here, all over 2. And then the other reason people don't like this is because now all of a sudden, look at this, I have fractions within square roots, and I have a square root and the square root, and it's just kind of messy. So we just go through and do the math that we're used to doing. So this one, I'm going to make a common denominator because I have to get the top, so it's one fraction. And I get, what do I get? I get 2 minus root 3. I don't know what that is, so I write 2 minus root 3 over 2, and that's all being divided by 2. And then, look, I have a fraction being divided, and so I'm going to make this into a fraction. I'm dividing by a fraction. I multiply by the reciprocal of the bottom, so now that's gone because I moved it up there. And then I get plus or minus the square root. And let's see, on the top, I get 2 minus root 3 times 1, so it's 2 minus root 3. And on bottom, I get 2 times 2, that's 4. So here's what's happening. I've got this, but notice I have this out in front. This needs to be dealt with. It's either plus or a minus. Now notice I have 105. What quadrant is 105 in? 105 is going to be about there. So that means 105 is in the second quadrant. I'm looking at sine. Sine is positive. So I'm in the second quadrant. It's positive sine. Sorry, sine is positive there. So that means my answer here is positive. So this is going to be a positive square root of 2 minus root 3 over 4. Okay, so then this is my answer. You may need to watch this a couple times to really get a grasp on it. Let's do another example though. So here I have the cosine of 165. Now the formula for this says it's plus or minus, and then I have the square root of 1 plus cosine of u over 2. So it's actually very similar to sine. Sine is 1 minus cosine u over 2. Cosine is plus cosine of u over 2. So again, I'm trying to figure out what u is. Remember, this right here is really some number divided by 2. And I need to figure out that number so I can put it there. So we're going to take 101.
Hey, wait, we've got our dad's here.
Sure, is she in the comments?
Yeah.
Okay, go wait with her. So that was just my child asking if she could go somewhere. So okay, so we have 165, we take it times 2, you get 330 degrees. So u is 330, which means right here is 330. Let me erase that so I can actually read it. So we have 330 degrees. Once again, it's something on the unit circle, right? So 330 degrees is right there. So then I continue on, plus or minus the square root of 1 plus. Now cosine is the x value. X is long here. That's going to be root 3 over 2 again. It's positive, so I leave it there. And then it's a matter of simplifying. I can't leave it like this. So I'm going to get the 1. I'm going to put that 2 over 2. And then we get, what do we get? We get 2 plus root 3 all over 2. And I'm dividing that by 2. I'm dividing that by 2 over 1 so that I can multiply by the reciprocal. So that's gone now. And so then I get plus or minus the square root of 2 plus root 3 over 4. Oh no, on the last one I made a mistake because I'm actually, this is not okay to leave it like this. See, here's the thing. I need to square root that number because I can. Square root of 4 is 2. So now I don't have square root on the bottom. I took care of it. On top, I still have 2 plus the square root of 3 inside the square root. And this actually I cannot fix. I cannot take this and fix it because it's just too much going on and it's just too bit messy. So we just leave this alone. But the rules still apply. You can't have a fraction inside the square root. So we still have to take the square root of 4 and get 2 down there. So on the last page, for me to go back would totally mess up the video. So on the last page, you would still have to do that and you'd get this. So I think if we compare it to the last one, it should be 2 minus the square root of 3 all over 2 here. Okay, plus or minus. Let's see. We got to figure that out. 165 is still in the second quadrant. Cosine, though, in the second quadrant is negative. So that means this one is negative. So there's my answer. Again, you may have to watch this a couple times to really get a grasp on it, to understand what you're doing. Okay, one other example of the type of things when you're finding an angle is, let's say it tells you this. You want to find sine of u over 2 if you know something about the sine of u. You know that sine of u is 3/5, and let's just say I made this up. Let's just say we're in quadrant, sine is positive. Let's go in quadrant 2. So I draw myself my angle. I've got sine of u is opposite over hypotenuse. I do the Pythagorean theorem. I get -4 for the adjacent. Okay. So now I want to find sine of u over 2. Now the formula for sine of u over 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine u over 2. And that's all right because guess what? I know the triangle that'll give me the cosine of u. So we go ahead and replace that. So we get plus or minus the square root of 1 minus the cosine of u is -4 over 5 all over 2. We get plus or minus the square root. These are going to be plus, and this will be a 5 over 5. So 5 plus 4 is 9 over 5 divided by 2 over 1, multiplied by the reciprocal. So we get plus or minus the square root of 9 over 10. All right, so then if we keep on doing our math, we got the square root of 9 on top. That's 3 over the square root of 10. We need to rationalize that. So we get 3 square roots of 10 over 10. Oh, but we need to figure out plus or minus. Let's see here. Sine inverse. Sine inverse of 3/5. Right? Let's do that. So, because I need to know more about my angles. I'm going to do this in degrees. So sine inverse of 3 over 5, it tells me that this angle here, oh, it's 36. Oh, that's crappy. Look at that. It's 36.86. But here's the thing. I was told it was in quadrant 2. Well, that's because, remember, inverse only gives you in the first and fourth quadrant. But what it did tell me, this is 36.86, or 87, whatever you want to call it. Well, guess what? This reference angle is 36.86. So technically, if I really want to know what's this angle, I'm going to take 180 minus 36.87, and I get 143.13. Whew, that's a lot of work, and I haven't even found that. I just found what u is. U is 143.13, and why do I do this? Because I need to know what u over 2 is. So I divide that by 2, and I get 71.57. So why did I do that? Because I want to know what quadrant I'm in. I am in the second quadrant, 71 degrees. And in the second quadrant, what are we doing? Sine is positive. So that means this is my answer. It's a positive 3 root 10 over 10. You have to figure out what quadrant you're in. And in order to do that, you need to know what quadrant you were in for the original. Not only what quadrant you're in, but how big is that angle? Because when you split it in half, does it move it to another quadrant, or is it still in the same quadrant? You don't know. So you have to actually figure out the number of the angle using your calculator, using sine inverse, and then take that and divide it by 2. But again, you got to think about this, you guys. If you're doing inverse, it's going to give you the first quadrant, but we're really in the second quadrant, so how does that relate? All right, so that is how you find half angle, finding the angles. Good luck.